Today's main news stories, as presented by IBA's English News Department, leaves us, as it seems, with more questions than answers. For example, what options are open to Israel in the face of the continued escalation of violence in Gaza? Is a major military offensive by Israel a realistic option? And should Israel continue providing humanitarian aid to Gaza even while being ambushed? And yesterday, 12 Qassam rockets were launched into the Israeli town of Sderot. Meanwhile, 100 Israeli trucks crossed in the Hamas-controlled area in Gaza, providing much-needed fuel, food, and medical supplies. Mohammed Abbas, president of the PA in Ramallah, has awarded 2 female terrorists who aided in killing Jews the Al-Quds Medal of Honor. Is Abu Mazen, that's Abbas's nickname, a master at doublespeak? Or, should I say, lying? The Palestinian Media Watch, led by Itamar Marcos, confirms the continued promotion of incitement and a culture of hate on PA television, radio, and print media. And how does Israel and the rest of the world respond to this fact? Really, most in the rest of the world do nothing.
This is IBA News coming to you from Jerusalem. We open with a flare-up of deadly violence in Gaza. 3 IDF soldiers were killed early today in an exchange of heavy gunfire with Palestinian terrorists next to the Gaza Strip security fence. 2 other soldiers were wounded. The army has identified one of the soldiers killed as 19-year-old Corporal Matan Ovdat from Moshav Patishi. He'll be laid to rest this evening in Ofakim. The other 2 soldiers were both Bedouin, one of them Minhash Albinat of Kseife. He was buried this afternoon. At least 4 terrorists were killed in a separate incident in Gaza today. IBA's Dennis Zinn has this report.
Initial details released on the early morning attack indicate that the Palestinians carried out a well-planned and executed ambush. 3 IDF soldiers were killed and 3 others wounded. There were no casualties on the Palestinian side, and the gunmen escaped unharmed. At around 6 a.m. this morning in foggy light, IDF spotters noticed suspicious movements close to the border fence in the central sector of the Gaza Strip, close to Kibbutz Be'eri. A force from the Givati Brigade's Tzabar battalion crossed into the Palestinian side to scout the area and engage the terrorists if necessary. The force was suddenly subjected to intense fire from some 6 terrorists hiding in well-protected and commanding positions. 2 soldiers were shot dead, 4 were wounded and evacuated to Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. 1 died soon after as doctors were unable to stabilize his condition. 2 others were admitted in moderate state and 1 with light injuries. The soldiers who took part in the attack said they failed to identify the location of the terrorists, as did the IDF gunners deployed along the fence. Nevertheless, officers in the Southern Command this morning said the force operated as is expected in all stages of the clash, that is, including returning fire and preparing to assault the terrorists, and finally evacuating the wounded and retreating. They said that the IDF has a high record of success in preventing daily attacks along the Gaza border. However, they added, the terrorists constantly watch the IDF forces to learn their movements in order to try and outwit them. Sometimes they succeed. The Hamas organization claimed responsibility for this attack.
The Hamas terrorist regime in Gaza continues to try to kill Israeli civilians, and they continue with their military buildup. The Israeli Defense Forces are acting to protect our people.
Besides the clash near Kibbutz Be'eri, during the night fighting also took place in the Sajaiya neighborhood east of Gaza City. An IDF force searching for terrorists and terrorist weapons demolished a structure packed with explosives that was situated adjacent to a mosque. In the exchanges, 4 terrorists were killed and several others wounded. 1 IDF soldier was airlifted to hospital in moderate condition. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
And our reporter adds that despite today's ambush of IDF soldiers, Israel allowed the resumption of fuel supplies to the Gaza Strip's only power plant. The supplies were cut off after last week's deadly attack on the Nachal Oz fuel dump. EU officials confirmed that the European-funded fuel has started to reach the power plant. And as the violence escalated in Gaza, the colour red alert sounded in Sderot and other western Negev communities this morning as Palestinians launched 12 Qassam rockets into Israel. The rockets landed in open areas, causing no damage and no casualties. Angry reaction in Jerusalem today to reports that PA President Mahmoud Abbas has chosen to confer the Al-Quds Mark of Honor, the PLO's highest medal, on 2 female terrorists who helped murder Israelis. Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni said today that if the reports are true, they present a troublesome message to the world, one that runs counter to the stated commitment of the Palestinian Authority to fight terror. Senior diplomatic sources in Jerusalem warn that the move would have grave consequences. Israel Radio reported today that Abbas authorized the decision to confer the medal on Ahlam Tamimi, a Hamas supporter serving a life sentence in an Israeli jail for driving a suicide bomber to the Sbarro restaurant in Jerusalem, where he blew himself up and decimated a Jerusalem family. And Amra Muna, the woman who seduced the Israeli teenager Ofir Rahum over the internet, lured him to Ramallah, where he was murdered by her co-conspirators. Abbas himself was en route to Russia. He refused to comment on that report. A short time ago, I talked to political analyst and Jerusalem Post columnist Calev Bendavid about the situation in Gaza, the tragedy there, and the government's policies.
Low, and I think beyond just the consequences of this incident, it's going to just raise more apprehension among the public about whether the government is pursuing a correct strategy in dealing with the situation in Gaza.
And is it, in your view?
I think they have a major problem, which is obviously the government does not want to go into a major military incursion into the Gaza Strip prior or during the 60th anniversary celebrations next month. We're expecting George W. Bush and other leaders. On the other hand, we must react to the offensive actions that Hamas is taking. And the problem is the longer we do that without really launching a major operation, we're giving Hamas the opportunity to create traps like the one they laid today for the IDF.
And you do believe, though, that the solution is a military one, not one of talks between Israel and Hamas in any format? Well,
look, we have certainly a short-term security problem. We saw that with the attack on the Nahal Oz depot last week. Over the longer term, I don't see Israel, having direct negotiations with Hamas. I don't think Hamas is going to soften its position anytime in the near or even distant future. Obviously, we can maintain, there can be some kind of dialogue through third parties, the Egyptians, even possibly the PA. But ultimately, I think there probably will have to be some kind of military action down there.
Let's talk briefly in the time we have remaining, Calev, about the reports that PA President Mahmoud Abbas has decided to award the PLO's highest medal to 2 women terrorists involved in murderous attacks against Israelis. If true, what does this say about Mahmoud Abbas?
Well, look, even if not true, just this week, Itamar Marcus of the non-governmental organization Palestinian Media Watch made a presentation to the U.S. Congress, which he showed that some of the incitement against Israel and even anti-Semitic incitement we saw during the years of Arafat is still going on in the PA. And I think Israel, and certainly the United States as the primary sponsor of the process underway, has to really sit down with Abbas and say zero tolerance for this kind of culture of hate, this kind of incitement that we've seen in the past and we can't let carry on here.
But if there is indeed a culture of hate, is there any substantive difference between Fatah and Hamas except for the rhetoric that they use?
Well, there is. Listen, first of all, rhetoric is important, and that is the basis of diplomacy. You have to at least start with that on the ground, and that's our problem with Hamas. We don't even have a starting point for that. So obviously this government, certainly the Omar government, is committed to pursuing a process with Abbas. He's the only partner, realistic partner, that we have at this point. So I don't think even such incidents as we're discussing now, possible incitement, honoring a terrorist, is going to halt the process. I think right now certainly the Omar and Bush governments are more in the process of trying to guide it in the correct direction.
Calev Bendavid, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure, and Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. And in other security news, a Palestinian woman was arrested today for the attempted stabbing of a soldier at a Ramallah checkpoint. Security officials say the knife fell from the woman's belongings as she made a sudden dash at the soldiers. The suspect was arrested and taken for questioning. Staying with security, and reports from Egypt indicate that security forces in the Sinai Peninsula have launched a manhunt for 4 terror cells allegedly planning to carry out attacks against Israelis and Western tourists. The Egyptians have set up roadblocks in North and South Sinai. The Israeli Counter-Terrorist Bureau has issued a severe travel warning, urging Israelis to keep out of Sinai during the Passover holiday. Security officials say there is a clear and present danger of attacks on tourist sites. And at the same time, a high-level alert has been put in place at Israeli missions and Jewish institutions around the world in advance of the Passover holiday. Senior defense officials say the danger of a possible Hezbollah attack in retaliation for the February assassination of arch-terrorist Imad Mughniyeh will be at its highest over the holiday. Day 3 of President Shimon Peres's trip to Poland today. Peres held talks with his Polish counterpart, Lech Kaczynski, with a focus on economic cooperation between the two countries. Kaczynski said his country supports Israel not only because of the special relationship created by the Holocaust, but because Israel is the most peace-loving country in the Middle East. Peres said while Israel and Poland are not connected geographically, they are connected by history. He thanked Poland for taking a strong position against Islamic terrorism and the nuclearization of Iran. Later today, Peres will meet with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and deliver a lecture at Warsaw University. Peres arrived in Poland on Monday to attend ceremonies marking the 65th anniversary of the 1943 Warsaw Ghetto uprising against the Nazis. The United Nations Security Council has issued a statement reiterating its commitment to full implementation of ceasefire resolution 1701. The wording calls for the disarming of Hezbollah and all Lebanese militias and the ban on all arms transfers to them. The resolution also calls for Israel and Lebanon to support a permanent ceasefire and a long-term solution based on full respect for the undrawn blue line along the border. Back to Gaza now, and joining us from our Tel Aviv studio is Dr Yoram Karate, Middle East and terror expert from the Herzliya Center. Dr. Karate, thank you very much for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Would you say, Dr. Karate, that we're edging closer to all-out military confrontation in Gaza?
Well, I'm not sure that this will be in the short run. For the time being, Israel is engaged with various affairs, to do with the 60th year of our independence. For that matter, I assume that in the short run, the Israeli forces will continue more or less to do what they have been doing all the time. Although, as we saw today, there were several casualties, unfortunately. But I doubt, unless there is a very major operation that will be most successful in the eyes of Hamas, in other words, many Israeli casualties, then it could be that there would be a change. But for the near future, I doubt it.
Dr. Karate, Hamas is boasting about a successful ambush today from their point of view. Do you suppose that they know what we know, that we don't want all-out confrontation before May, and they're baiting us, they're provoking us deliberately?
I assume that they know, for the simple reason that they read Hebrew, and they know more or less what we think of or what we do. It's not very difficult to know because we are an open country, unlike, of course, the Gaza Strip, which is not so open. So in this case, they try their luck. They know that there are operations, as the Israeli forces are doing every day, every night, and they try to see to what extent they can be successful or not. And of course, what helps them is the fact that they are changing tactics following the training that they receive in Iran, in Syria, and in Lebanon under the auspices of Hezbollah. And in this case, as it happened today, I suppose for their luck and not the misfortune of the Israeli forces, they were more lucky in the way that they killed 3 of our soldiers and managed to flee. So in this case, I suppose that they could count it as a success, as the spokesman already said so on the media, as it was shown several hours ago.
But Dr. Kehati, along with the violence, Hamas seems pretty interested in a ceasefire. Some of their leaders, including Haniyeh, are on their way to Cairo to discuss a ceasefire with them. Are they under pressure? What is all this diplomatic activity on the part of Hamas about?
Well, you have to differentiate between the political leadership and, of course, the military wing of Israel al-Qassam. The political leadership would like to have ceasefire because, as far as the civilian aspect of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, since they took over Gaza last June, has not been very successful. So in this case, they would like to have this sort of what is called tahdiyah, this, lull, in order to be able to improve their lot as far as the civilian infrastructure is concerned. On the other side, on the military aspect, this is more successful for them because Izz ad-Din al-Qassam not always follow the strict ideology or view of the political leadership, and in this case, since they have been trained and much of their weapons was smuggled through the tunnels, they try to engage in fighting against the Israeli army. And sometimes, of course, they lose, sometimes they win. In this case, this is another aspect of the double, or let's say the parallel lines that Hamas has taken since it came to power, or they overtook Gaza last year.
Right. Dr. Yoram Karate, thank you very much indeed for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Former US President Jimmy Carter met in Jerusalem this morning with two Knesset members, Israel Beitenu leader Avigdor Lieberman and afterwards Kadima MK Yochanan Plesner. Lieberman presented to Carter his plan for an exchange of population and territory between Israel and the Palestinians. Plesner, the only member of the ruling Kadima party to meet with Carter, explained the government's opposition to the former president's upcoming visit with Hamas chief Khalid Mashal in Damascus. Carter is reportedly furious that Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has refused to meet with him. Carter said that the Geneva Initiative is the only solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He stressed his belief that it's impossible to finalize a peace deal in the Middle East without Syria and Hamas. Carter also said it was time for Israel to stop targeting terrorist leaders in Gaza. According to Palestinian sources, two senior Hamas figures are planning to meet with Carter in Cairo tomorrow. The two, Ismail Haniyeh and Mahmoud Azahar, will reportedly discuss with Egyptian leaders their proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza.
But I don't think that it's possible to have an ultimate peace agreement here without the involvement of Syria. The Golan Heights issue has to be resolved. Syria has to be friendly toward Israel, not an enemy. And I don't think it's possible without involving Hamas. I don't care if Hamas represents 10% of the Palestinian people or 42% or 44%. It doesn't matter to me. But to have them completely excluded even from conversations or consultations, I think is counterproductive. And so I decided to come and to meet with everyone who was willing to talk to me.
And we stay with that subject as we return to our Tel Aviv studio to be joined by Kadima MK Yochanan Plesner, who did meet with former President Carter this morning. Thank you very much indeed, Knesset Member Plesner, for being our guest this evening. Your party leader, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, refused to meet with Carter. Why did you decide to meet him?
I thought it was important for me to convey a message to President Carter that his involvement in the attempt to promote the peace process is actually counterproductive in as much as he tries to engage Hamas rather than strengthen the moderate forces in the region and help us marginalize Hamas and ultimately also topple it.
And was it a heated meeting with the former president, and did you manage to make any inroads into his position?
I believe that he listened, but I think that he's quite steadfast in his opinion that Hamas should be engaged, that Hamas should be part of the process, that a ceasefire should be reached on Hamas terms. I think this would help Hamas achieve its political goals. It would help Hamas establish a front Iranian base or a guerrilla division that is Iranian backed in our back door, in our backyard. This is very dangerous for us. It contradicts our interests, and I quite frankly told him that I understand Prime Minister Olmert's decision to refrain from granting him the position of mediator under such conditions.
So that's the reason why Prime Minister Olmert decided not to meet him, because he did not want to create the impression that Carter was carrying any sort of message to Khalid Mashal.
No, I'm not representing the Prime Minister. I said that I understood it, and this is the rationale that I provide. I think the Prime Minister had a schedule issue as well.
Now, as you know, Knesset Member Plesner, former President Carter is perceived by many Israelis as being distinctly hostile to Israel, not only because of his determination to deal with Hamas, but also because of his books and his accusation against Israel of practicing apartheid and so on. How did you find him?
On a personal level, he was very kind, very generous, but I think that his views are very dangerous. The agenda that he tries to promote is very dangerous for Israeli security interests, and quite frankly, to the interests of moderates in the region and in the world. And this is why I hope that he would either take a step back or change his policy in a way that would help strengthen moderates. He can provide with a political legitimacy to say Abu Mazen to make concessions on issues such as the question of right of return. He can provide Abu Mazen with legitimacy and support to fight terrorism and build a unified security apparatus. This is a productive involvement. What he's doing today is counterproductive.
Now, one more quick question, if I may, on the subject of the tragedy in Gaza today. Are you satisfied, Knesset Member Plesner, that the government led by your party knows what it's doing in Gaza, that it has a clear and effective policy there?
The struggle in Gaza is an ongoing struggle. It's not a conflict that would be resolved in one day. We have to continue the fight against Hamas terrorists in Gaza on an ongoing basis, to take them out, to arrest them, to attack them from the air, from the land. And it would be counterproductive for us to target citizens, because it would reduce our degrees of freedom of targeting Hamas terrorists, and it would increase the support in Hamas. It's an ongoing struggle. I have the faith in the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister that we are pursuing an effective policy, but we have to understand that it's part of an ongoing struggle against radical Islam and against a Palestinian terror ring that has been around for decades and has to be defeated round after round.
Right. Knesset Member Yochanan Plesner, we appreciate very much your being our guest on IBA News this evening. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.
Well, a sharp switch to sports now, and all eyes will be on Ramat Gan Stadium tonight for two games that will determine the Soccer State Cup finalists. Beitar Jerusalem has all but sealed the league championship, but is certainly distracted following a scandalous end to Sunday's league match against Maccabi Herzliya, in which thousands of Beitar fans stormed the field in the 87th minute, thereby forcing a halt in the contest before Jerusalem could win the game and clinch the league title. Police in Ramat Gan will be mobilized to prevent disturbances initiated by Beitar's raucous supporters as they match up against Maccabi Netanya in the second semi-final. The opening game pits Beitar Shimshon Tel Aviv against Hapoel Tel Aviv. The third division Beitar Shimshon squad hopes to do the nearly impossible as they try to record another upset on the way to the State Cup final. Live coverage on Channel 1 begins at 5:45. We could all do with some light relief now, and for that we look up in the sky. It's a bird, it's a plane, well, it's a duck. A 10-meter fabric duck sewn into a balloon was placed atop Tel Aviv's City Hall in Rabin Square yesterday. The idea to adorn the city with a giant duck didn't just fall from the sky. The vision was that of Dudu Geva, one of Israel's most cherished cartoonists who created the iconic image. Geva died young from a heart attack in 2005, days after being fired from the Haaretz newspaper. Before his untimely death, he tried to convince Tel Aviv's mayor to liven up the city through weird, wacky and subversive art projects. Recently, Dudu's two grown children pitched the idea to the city, and it was approved almost instantly. Ensconced for a month, the orange and yellow creation not only honors Geva's memory, but celebrates Tel Aviv's upcoming 100th anniversary. Money matters now. The cost of a loaf of price-controlled bread was raised this morning by 4%. The Trade Ministry approved the price hike after receiving a request from bakery owners based on the rise in the price of wheat and energy. The bakers had asked for a 5% increase, but the government concluded that 4% was enough to cover the bakers' expenses. Probably hope we wouldn't notice the rise over the Pesach holiday. And in more money matters, a good day at the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange with sharp gains. The shekel was mixed against major foreign currencies. And our weather will be partly cloudy with a further drop in temperatures. Here's a look at the highs and lows. that's all the time we have for today. Do join us again tomorrow at the same time on the same channel for more news and analysis from Israel. Until then, thanks for watching IBA News. Have a quiet evening. Shalom from Jerusalem.